So welcome once again here to Chris Howard in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. What a wonderful place to be with Mr. Gordon Bizar. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Chris. I'm really enjoying this a lot.
So Gordon Bizar, of course, is from Bizar Finance. You've done so much in your lifetime. Can you give me just a 1-minute synopsis of some of the major accomplishments?
Sure. Just spent my life as a pioneer in business, always trying to do the things that other people aren't seeing or other people aren't doing. In the 60s, which was my first real dynamic experience in business, I took a financial industry that was all segmented, everything was specialties, and I was a pioneer in something that became an integrated industry where you organize around a person's needs all the financial services as opposed to just trying to sell them one. Right. So that's how I spent the 60s and the 70s. I was a pioneer in the leveraged buyout field. It became popular in the 80s. I did it in the 70s when leveraged buyout was very different. You bought companies, you combined them for economies of scale, you combined them for efficiencies, and you built something.
Right.
In the 80s, it was rape, loot, and pillage. You borrowed a lot of money.
Wall Street, right?
Right. You borrowed a lot of money. You went in, you bought up companies that were inefficiently managed at that point and worth more broken up and liquidated than they were as a whole. And so you borrowed the money, you went in and you bought the company, you liquidated out the assets, paid off the loans, and if you could do it quick enough, because interests were high in those days, you could make money. But rape, loot, and pillage is not my game. I'm a builder, so in the 80s I had to find something different to do. So that's when I founded this course, Bizar Financing, where I would teach people how to use leveraged buyouts, but not to do rape, loot, and pillage, but how to buy their small company. How to buy it from somebody who had it for sale, buy another company, add it to it, build it in that process. And you didn't have to start from scratch with nothing, with no momentum. You could take the assets of the company and the cash flow of the company you wanted to buy and use that to create the resources, the cash and the cash flow to buy it. So that was, just an intelligent way to get into business, and then you didn't have the risk of that startup company, most of which fail. You had a company that already was past that 5-year period, and you knew the numbers going in. You knew exactly what it was capable of because you could look at the history over the last 5 years in the financial statements. So I spent the 80s training other people how to do LBOs. In the 90s, I again was a pioneer in the field. This was the one pioneering that I did that didn't really work out. It was just and I'll explain why. I started a company called Participate, and at that time, the internet hadn't really come on yet. And I was looking for how do you create interactivity in the media. And television has the most reach of any of the media. And so what I tried to do was to put together using the phone system and touch phones, a way to interact with the programming that you were watching and to actually affect the outcome of the programming that you were watching by the way in which you did it. Now, there were many different formats and scenarios by which we put shows together. We got it up, we got it running, but it was very quickly overtaken for interactivity by the internet.
Sure.
So it was kind of like right idea, but wrong place, wrong time.
Right, wrong box.
Wrong box. So, when you are pioneering, you do take a risk because sometimes the ideas will work out and sometimes they don't. But I like pioneering because when you don't have competition, you don't have to worry about pricing, you don't have to worry about narrow margins, and when you make it, you have the opportunity to make a lot of money, especially if you're really out in front of that curve. So that's what I did throughout the 90s. That was the area that I was involved in. And today I'm involved in an area called aggregation, which is, more specifically, it's called marketplace aggregation, and it's invented here.
Let me ask you, what's the word aggregation mean? What's the definition of that term?
The way we use it, it's the coming together of peers, of business owners as equals, to accomplish together something that they couldn't accomplish individually. And the marketplace part of it is that you build your company around a specific marketing theme so that every company coming together has something to do with that marketing theme and can cross-pollinate, can cross-market, can share resources. That resource sharing brings your costs down. Cross-marketing of your customer bases around this common marketing theme allows you to exponentially increase your sales. And in today's stressed economy, if you can very effectively explode your sales, decrease your cost of doing business, expand your margins, it's awesome what you can accomplish.
Now, when you talk about aggregation, you're creating a new entity, is that correct?
You're creating a new entity.
With the combined resources of the other entities that are contributing.
Yes.
But are you folding those entities into the aggregation, or does it become two separate entities that are running simultaneously?
That's a really good question, and it's one of the ones that we had to wrestle with a great deal, because if you take entrepreneurial people, the reason they went into business for themselves is they had this high need to control their own destiny.
Autonomy.
Right, and autonomy, independence. That's why they wanted to go into business for themselves. If you were to take that away from them, you'd be removing one of the biggest motivations that they have and one of their great strengths. So the real challenge was, how do you combine the ability to bring companies together effectively and harmonize them, have the benefits of a big enterprise, and yet still allow them to keep that autonomy? And we actually solved that problem, and it's done through a mechanism where they come in but not immediately absorbed into the bigger company. There's this 2-year engagement period during which we're evaluating them, they're evaluating us, we're working with them, we're helping them build their sales, we're helping them reduce their costs. And at the end of that 2-year period, the idea is we're all comfortable enough with each other that they have faith and confidence that our contracts call for, that they're going to maintain their independence when they're in the company.
So the goal is ultimately to fold in the company.
Right, but not to change the management.
Right.
Okay, they still continue to manage their own company, and the amount of ownership they get in the aggregation is not only what they're worth coming in, but for the next 4 years, as they continue autonomously to build their portion of the operation, we know how much contribution they're making to profit.
Right.
And so they get more and more ownership in the aggregation, the more and more profit that they can contribute. So the model is built on deliverables. The more you deliver, the more profit you create for the organization, the more of it you own, and the more of it is distributed to you. So we allow them to keep their autonomy of management, and it works because they get ownership relative to the value of what they produce.
Right. Now the question that comes to my mind is, what if you bring some players in that are playing at a certain level, then you bring some really big players in. I'm foreseeing the answer already, right. But you bring some really big players in, the equity is dwarfed by the larger players that are then coming in,
right.
But a big piece of something larger.
A little piece of something very big.
Right.
Is very big.
Right.
But see, we have a unique advantage. This is why I love being a pioneer, because there's no benchmark for what we do. Once people get it, how powerful aggregation is, they want to be part of it. Nobody says no to us. When we go through a full briefing of what it is and how it works, the most common answer is, how do we get in? How do we do this with you? That being the case, and since there's no place else that they can go, they can't say, well, that's your offer, what's somebody else's? There isn't any. So what that enables us to do is to go immediately to the companies that are the preeminent companies in that field. To go to the people who are, if they're not number 1, they're number 2 or 3, and maybe number 4. Now the reason that that's significant is that the premier company is always a little hard to talk to, because they're a little arrogant and they think they got the market by the tail.
Right.
So they're not as open. But the 2 and 3 companies who want to knock the number one
out of their spot. Right.
Yeah, and you go to them and you show them how you can produce for them the resources to go take the number 1 spot. You got their attention.
Right.
Okay, and by doing it that way, you're taking companies that are at a sufficient level where they can look at each other and say, okay, I want to work with that company because I know their quality, I know that their commitment to service, I know their commitment to growth, I know the quality of their management, I know their capabilities, and yeah, I want to be part of something that they're part of. And when you get that feeling among the people that you're bringing into it, that's when the thing snaps together, and everybody's really going to win, because supporting each other, an independent company can't compete with them.
Got it. Boy, the sounds of the jungle and the wild out here. I love
At least they're birds, not apes, right?
Yes, that's true. Now, if I go to Borneo next week, like I was talking about, it's going to be a little different. But okay, I want to back up a little bit, because one of the things that you've done along the way is that you talked about leverage buyouts. You talked about you and I have had discussions about purchasing a company with no money.
Yes.
And I know that you you had built up a reputation for that, and you trained people how to do that. Can you just give me the kind of the lowdown? How does that work? How do you buy a company?
I'll give you the elevator version.
Yeah, please. Yeah, that's perfect.
We only have 2 floors to go, so I got to
exactly. Yes.
Okay. It's really simple. The basic concept is you're going to use the assets, the existing assets, and the existing cash flow of that business to create all the cash to do it. And the process, very simple. Inside that business are land and buildings, inventory, machinery and equipment, accounts receivable. All these are assets.
Right, that's in a product business, we're assuming.
And they can all be financed. Well, okay, let's stay with the product.
Okay.
And they're all financeable. So there's leverage there that if you were to buy the company, once you own it, you can do all the borrowing.
Right.
Okay? There's a cash flow in that business. There's income coming in because it's got customers, and that has a flow of income, and presumably you're buying the company because it has some profitability, at least in the simplest of explanations, it has profitability.
Right.
Okay, so if you borrow money to buy it, you're going to pay back the loan out of the profits and the cash flow of the company. Yes. So the only key is how do you get the money to physically buy it, because once you buy it, you can borrow against assets and leverage it internally. So this is where we introduce people to this concept called a swing loan.
Actually, let me stop you there for 1 second. What if they've already borrowed against the assets and they're so debt-ridden that it gives you no more leverage with the assets inside the company?
Okay. Then you relieve them of their pain. If they're in that place, then they're in pain. The owner of that company is sweating it because he's fully leveraged.
Right.
Okay, so the thing that I do when I find companies like that is I wouldn't buy a company like that to just buy that one. Okay, and the reason is because it's already stressed out and leveraged. Remember, you don't have to buy that company. You can look for another company that's got a different profile.
Just wait for the perfect pitch.
All right. Okay.
Right.
So, but let's say that's the company that you want. Okay, and then I would look for not just buying that company. I've done this before where I've actually purchased two companies that separately were losing money. Separately were very distressed, but they were each losing money for the right reason. Okay. This company was losing money because the people just weren't good marketers. They were engineers. They started the company. They had great designs. They produced a great product. They were very efficient in their structuring of their manufacturing process. They did it all right. Problem is they don't know how to sell, so they don't have a market for their product. And as good as it is, it's not selling because they don't know how to do that.
Right.
And so the company's stressed. On the other hand, you got a company over here who was started by a couple of promoters. Man, they could sell snow to Eskimos, but they didn't have a clue how to build a good product. So they threw the thing together, it's defective, they shipped the stuff because they're selling like crazy and it's coming back with returns and with defective product. So you've got a great sales group here, you got a great product here. Neither one of them's making money, they're both losing money. Both of the companies are available for bargain prices and for bargain terms. You buy them both. Then you bring the sales group into the company that has the great production, and you liquidate out the assets that weren't being deployed well as a way of recapturing a lot of the borrowed money that you used to buy them in the first place. So your strategy has to be different. Every time you look at a company, it's not a simple, well, okay, I'm going to use the assets and cash flow to buy the company. It starts there. You asked for the elevator speech.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So I gave you the elevator speech, but you really do want to evaluate each company and develop a strategy that enables you to take these tools and use them effectively for that company.
Got it. Now, how do you find these companies? How did you go about it? Because I'm sure there's multiple ways of doing it. But
most people who look for businesses to buy make a big mistake. They use really just two sources. The source they use is they go to business brokers, and you can get a business.
You can find a business broker on the internet.
Yeah. Or you can even go on the internet and just put in businesses for sale. Okay, and you get back stuff. Okay. The problem is you won't find the best companies that way historically, and the reason is because the good companies never get listed. They're bought by somebody who had an inside track to that company, who knew it was coming for sale and bought it before it ever got listed. The good ones never get there. Okay, so now the real question you're really asking is, how do you get on the inside track? How do you become one of those handful of people who get the bargain companies and the best companies, not how do you be the massive folk, people picking over the stuff that's left over? Well, here's how you do it.